that was. All right, man, peace. So many brothers asked me about my observations pertaining to this fight, what I thought about it, that being the 140-pound championship bout that was waged between Mr. Tank Davis and Mr. Mario Barrios. Let me say this, I thought that it was one of the more impressive performances that I've seen from Tank Davis. I thought that he was in great condition. His footwork was very sharp, very crisp. And what was most impressive about Tank's performance was how he was able to handle a fighter who was about 5 to 6 inches taller than him, had way longer arms than him, was also very competitive. Mario Barrios is a very competitive young fighter. I've seen him fight quite a few times. He's very limited. He does get hit quite a lot. His trainer, Virgil Hunter, does a great job of sharpening him up and trying to keep him away from that reckless style, but he still falls prey to it because he's very competitive, as most Mexican fighters are. They love to mix it up. And when you have a fighter like a Tank Davis who has incredible power in both hands, that can be dangerous because Tank is also a great boxer. He doesn't get credit for his level of craft. He's able to hit you and for the most part avoid getting hit. Tank's only problem for the most part has always been his conditioning and his commitment to the sport. That's always been his issue. To me, from 135 to 140, the only fighter that I really think would be able to defeat Tank would probably be Devin Haney. And that would just be because of styles, the stylistic matchup. I would give Devin Haney a chance, an opportunity to defeat Tank. I'm not necessarily saying I would pick Devin Haney to defeat Tank. But just getting back to this fight, I thought that it was a great performance. And it was a very good fight. Tank took his time. He understood that for the most part, in order for him to get the victory, he was either going to have multiple knockdowns on Barrios or get the stoppage. Because Barrios, he's very responsible offensively, meaning what? He understands that in exchanges with Tank Davis, he has to get his jab off, and he pretty much has to be the last fighter in an exchange to land a punch or throw a punch so that he can win over the judges. And because he has longer arms, longer legs, if he extends his jab, he should be able to win his share of rounds. And I did think that Mario Barrios did win his share of rounds, even though Davis was by far the better fighter. He was just smaller. And I also thought that this is probably the toughest test that Davis has had thus far because of the quality of opponent as well as his size. The thing with Davis is that I have to see him with bigger names, because Mario Barrios is a great competitor, but he's not a great fighter. He's a fighter who gets a championship belt in a weight class where there are no superstars. There are really no superstars at 140 right now. I mean, the closest thing to that you might say is an Adrian Broner, who I would probably pick to defeat Mario Barrios as well, but Broner's all over the place. Now, a guy like Tank, the only question is 140 going to be a division where he stays at, or is it going to be like how Floyd Mayweather treated the 154-pound division, where he only moved up there for huge mega fights? Because I do think that a lot of the guys at 135 are going to start to exit 135 for 140 relatively soon. And that includes Teofimo Lopez, Devin Haney, the Instagram superstar Ryan Garcia. Most of those guys are going to move up to 140, most likely within the next year or so. So I just have to wonder if 140 is going to be a place where Tank stays, or is he going to vacillate and go back down to 135, go back up to 140. There are some rumblings that the Mayweather camp is trying to make a fight between Tank Davis and Keith "one-time" Thurman. Now, what could be the reason for that? Well, there are a multitude of reasons for that. Keith basically has not fought for 2 years. He's injury prone. He's on the other side of 30. And in his last fight, I won't say that he got dominated, but he did lose to a smaller fighter who the Mayweather camp probably thinks is a good comp for Tank Davis, that being Manny Pacquiao. Small fighters with fast feet who punch very hard and who have hard fists. And one thing that Keith Thurman showed us in that fight against Pacquiao is that he can be defensively irresponsible. He can be a fighter who's not as crisp with his combinations and with his footwork as he needs to be against a smaller fighter. You know, people build up, they always talk about, oh, well, you know, Pacquiao's a smaller guy and, you know, Tank Davis is a smaller guy. That stuff only matters when you don't have other attributes that can nullify your lack of height. As a matter of fact, lack of height can be a good thing if you know how to use it. If you're small, make yourself smaller. Like Joe Frazier, he was a short heavyweight, but he would accentuate his lack of height or stature with the bob and weave style, and try to get fighters to make mistakes, throwing sloppy jabs or sloppy right crosses. He can come over the top with the left hook. That's how he would catch Muhammad Ali so many times. Same thing with Tank. Same thing with Pacquiao. They want to sucker you in. I mentioned in the review that I did for Jermell Charlo against Castaño that Castaño was able to catch Jermell Charlo many times with blind left hooks countering, because he would lower his head, almost look towards the ground, and throw overhand left hooks, and he would be able to catch Charlo. If you watch Pacquiao's fight against Adrian Broner, he was able to catch Broner many times with that same tactic. Now, he and Broner are around the same size, but Pacquiao's probably about a half inch to an inch shorter than Broner. But he was able to do that because Broner would get lazy along the ropes and try to do his Floyd Mayweather impersonation. A lot of the guys who do the Mayweather impersonation, they forget that Mayweather uses his feet and his whole upper body to move, and he counters. He doesn't just stand there along the ropes letting guys hit him. But the point being is that Tank knows how to utilize his lack of stature. And I believe that the Mayweather camp liked what they saw in the Keith Thurman bout against Manny Pacquiao. And, what that might afford Tank Davis, because it appears that they've decided to utilize the same business paradigm with Tank that they utilized with Floyd. That Tank does not need to be chasing belts because his name is so big. You just chase the money. You go to each weight class, get one belt, maybe two belts, and then all the other fights at that weight class, you're trying to make the biggest name fight. Now, if the biggest name fight or the biggest money fight also happens to coincidentally be the fighter who has the championship belt, that's cool. But that's not what we're in it for. They're building Tank up. Basically Tank is the only guy in that weight class area of 135 or 140 who's a pay-per-view attraction, where people want to watch him fight. They don't even necessarily care who he's fighting. So they're trying to build him up similar to a Mike Tyson type of fighter, where basically you're paying to watch Tank fight. You're not really paying to watch him in a matchup against another fighter. And because of the speed and the power that he displays, they've been relatively successful thus far. But I do need to see Tank in there with better competition. The Mario Barrios fight, it was a nice little fight. Barrios is a nice little fighter. But he's a guy who, Al Heyman will probably end up taking care of him and matching him appropriately for the remainder of his career. But he really had no chance against Tank. If Tank couldn't beat him, pretty much his career would have been over. He would have become like an Adrian Broner type, who you match him appropriately with other guys, and people tune in to watch him get a knockout against guys who they know he can beat. For the most part, Broner's career is over on a championship level, because they know that, when the going gets tough, he's gonna bug out in some way. He doesn't handle pressure very well. Well, Tank, they have not dipped him into that pool yet. Maybe because they're worried about his mental. We know that Floyd has threatened in the past to put Tank in there with Lomachenko, and Tank basically started to have mental breakdowns over the possibility of that fight being made. So maybe they're trying to hide Tank from something right now. That's why I state that it would not surprise me if, once they finally make the fight with Devin Haney, should that ever happen, should that ever transpire, that Devin Haney defeat Tank. But we'll see. I think that Tank is more talented than Devin, but there's a lot that goes into, being a championship fighter, especially an elite level championship fighter. But overall, I thought that the fight was very exciting. Tank was able to break Barrios down the course of the fight because of his superior speed and skill. Great body punching. That's the thing about Tank. He knows how to vary his attacks. He caught him with some great counters, especially near the end of the rounds. Tremendous speed, good accuracy. So, the sky's the limit for Tank Davis. It's just about how focused he remains. It's all about him, because there's really not anyone in that area who's as talented as him. I would love to see him in there against Teofimo Lopez, even though I think that Teo is a little bit too slow for Tank. I think that Tank would probably hurt Teo, unless Teo catches him first. Like, that would be a real firefight, but I think that Tank is too fast for him, feet and hands. Now, this guy, Rolly Romero, he called out Tank after his fight. he was on the Jermell Charlo undercard, and he decided he was going to call out Tank. I would love to see that fight just for the hell of it. I think that guy Romero is hilarious. He reminds me a lot of Ricardo Mayorga, a guy who's very dangerous, believes in himself, doesn't care about being, conveyed to the public as a villain, and and once again he punches very hard. Romero punches very hard. He's just very sloppy. Terrible foot placement, always off balance, but he's as strong as an ox and punches like a mule's kick. So could he possibly catch Tank with something? Of course he can. One punch can change a whole fight, but the sky's the limit for Tank Davis thus far, as long as he continues to be matched appropriately. He's a guy who I could see going from 135 to 140 to 147, back down to 140, back down maybe even to 135, just based on how they match him, making sure that it's done appropriately, and taking advantage of the fact that he's very charismatic. His fighting style is very appealing, but we'll see where it goes. I need to see him against higher level competition over the next 2 years. If he doesn't fight Ryan Garcia, Teofimo Lopez, Devin Haney, I will be very, very disappointed. And of course, you also have the specter of Shakur Stevenson, but we know that he's on the other side of the river. But anyway, that's basically it on that. Once again, great performance by Tank Davis. I thought that he handled Barrios' length